All right, so when we get to our cover page, we want to think about how are we going to build our students to the unit goal. So when we're looking at this one, we're looking at 8th grade science, physical properties of matter. This comes as a spring semester unit, so you'll notice my unit goal is student will be able to analyze the physical properties of matter through direct measurement and modeling, so pushing to that higher level of Bloom's. Notice that the unit goal lines up nicely with unit assessment. Students will be provided with a cup of oobleck and analyze the physical state of oobleck with molecular models. So it ties in both the direct measurement, the modeling, and the same Bloom's verb. So to start us off, what I think about when we want to start is typically want to start out with something more straightforward, kind of that basic level. So after I've sorted all the concepts and ideas that this unit would cover, I kind of find the most straightforward basic lesson, and that's what I'm going to start with, and then I'm going to build from there to get to that unit goal before the traditional test. Then after that, we're going to enter that E and R phase, extending and refining, and finding ways to kind of push student thinking to higher levels as well as making that knowledge meaningful. So we're going to start with student will be able to describe, kind of start at that basic level of Bloom's, simply a description, and we're going to describe the utility of various physical properties of matter. But we're going to exclude density. So in order for us to be successful, we have to know what these physical properties are, but we don't want just students to know it. We also want them to think about why are they helpful, kind of what is the utility of those physical properties, so making it a little more meaningful for them. And the assessment piece, we're going to want to link that verb. Sometimes I use the same verb to help me out here. And we're going to describe 4 of the physical properties and how they would be useful in distinguishing 2 different materials. So that assessment for a lesson, you always want to link the Bloom's verb, same level, and you want to be able to visualize exactly what that assessment looks like. And typically, my first one's going to last me about 2 days. It's more straightforward content, but we also need to build in that hook and really get students engaged and excited about this new unit. Next, we're going to move on, and since we excluded density, I'm going to put that into my second one, my second objective, kind of take that out because it's a little more complex of a concept for middle level learners. So we're going to say describe the physical property of density. So again, straightforward. Students are going to be thinking about describing what this physical property is, and notice how we're kind of slowly piecing this together now, kind of building off the previous unit. And so what we're going to say for the assessment, I'm going to try to make it clear so when I get to it, that lesson plan, I know exactly what I need to do. And so we're going to say, given a layered beaker of liquids, students will describe or explain the basic properties of density that they're kind of observing in that beaker. Again, this is kind of a 2-day lesson here. So we're going to focus on those 2 days. And kind of in those 2 days, you kind of got to think about what is it that students are going to need to do. Next, we're going to move forward, and now we're going to kind of take these properties and think about how are they changing, right? So kind of creating a story and building up to eventually to be able to analyze the physical properties of matter. But at first, we've got to get them all on the table. So now we're going to think about changes. So we're going to say describes physical changes of matter. And then this time I'm thinking I want to tie this into student experience. And so the assessment piece, again, linking to the same level of Bloom's, we're going to say explain 4 ways to physically change a jar of honey. So kind of trying it to some student experience. And this is another kind of 2-day lesson plan. And this 4th one is really where we want to push students, and so it's going to end up being a little longer. We want to push students to getting to that unit goal level. So in this one, we're going to say student will be able to use models depicting solid, liquid, and gas phases of the same substance to explain how particle motion and density changes as phase changes. So we've got a lot going on here. That's why it's a 4-day lesson, but now we've got to that modeling piece, which is important for the unit goal, and we're kind of going to use the model to help us kind of explain kind of the motion of molecules and then tying in the physical properties and density. So it's kind of this big tying together lesson right before the traditional test. And so we'll say students will use a model to explain how particle motion and density changes as water boils. So kind of make it a very concrete example for them in that assessment. Now we've got to that traditional test that I said, and when I'm doing a lesson, I actually put 2 days for the test. I give them the first day is the test, and then the second day is typically a day in which they're using the test in some meaningful way. So whether it's a paired test to kind of further dig deep into the content, using a self-analysis form or some piece of that, so they're still learning from the test. And I always make my assessment exactly what kind of the unit goal is there. So we're going to say analyze the physical properties of matter. And then after that test is always kind of the tricky part for new teachers or teachers new to unit planning. And this is where we're going to spend probably about 4 more days before we take a performance assessment. And the performance assessment we already know is going to be analyzing that oobleck. So we can fill that in, and then we can think about how are we going to get ourselves there. So I always fill it in anyways. So we're going to say analyze the physical state of oobleck with molecular modeling. Okay, so now we're going to have 2 days, and this is where we're going to think about some behaviors of gases, perhaps. And so we're going to say examine behavior of gases. Notice how that is not as straightforward. It's a higher level of Bloom's verb. It's really kind of extending their knowledge of particles and physical properties. And we know that behaviors of gas are in respect to pressure, volume, and temperature. So we're going to kind of do that. Again, I want to kind of make a very clear assessment so I know when we're getting there. So we're going to kind of use a similar examine, distinguish, kind of how we use that verb is important here. Behavior of gas. We're going to examine, distinguish the behaviors of the gas, given 3 different scenarios involving kind of pressure, volume, and temperature. And this last one, right before that performance assessment, again, we're thinking about direct measurement. We're thinking about how to get them to use it more meaningfully. So we think about physical properties. A lot of students in the middle level like baking. Now, yes, baking also has chemical properties, but we're going to focus just on the physical properties. And so they have some experience of analyzing a substance in front of them that they're going to be doing for their performance assessment. So they'll have experience that they can then use the next day in the performance assessment. So we're going to say analyze the physical properties and changes of matter in baking. And so students will kind of go through that. And again, I'm going to use the verb distinguish. Sometimes it's good to kind of stick to a few ones. Students kind of know what those are, you know what they are, and what they look like. So we're going to say distinguish properties and changes of matter in baking. So students will have a little more fun with that one. And then of course, after I've kind of built my unit cover page, I go back in and make sure I've hit on all the standards that are required in my diocese. So I'll go in and fill in the standards at the end after formulating my unit plan. And then that also allows me to see if I'm missing anything and make any tweaks. So that's kind of the basics of building the unit plan. You can see the first 4 lessons focused on application and integration, building from straightforward to more complex. After the test, we push them a little farther, give them some meaningfulness, and then also hit that performance assessment that is always linked directly to that unit goal. So that's kind of the basis of creating a unit cover page in my 8th grade science class.